between being 65 and in the nursing home or 85 and chopping wood. It's not that you got 20 more years at the end of your life in the nursing home. You have 20 more years doing, activities that you like. How many have heard of blue zones? So blue zones are identified. I think there used to be 3 and now there's 6, if I remember that, or last time I looked. Blue zones are identified as areas of the world where a subgroup of people have, for whatever reason, have very long lives, long, healthy lives. And so one of those is, I think, in rural Italy, where the people eat Mediterranean-type diet and they live in the country, and they commonly live to be, close to 100. I think there's another one in the Tibet, someplace up in the Himalayas. But one of those is in Southern California, which you wouldn't expect to be a center of longevity, but it's in Loma Linda, California. And I was blessed to be there for 4 years in school. And just around me, it was common to have professors in their 80s and 90s. Still, Dr. Small and Dr. Barnes, we had a conference with a chapel for all the students in the school, and our youth group was arranging it. So I asked to interview them. I got those 2 up on the stage and just interviewed them on getting some wisdom from 90-year-old doctors. I had one of my classmates, his grandpa, I just saw him on the news just within the past year, Dr. Wareham, and he was, at last check, over 100 years old and still in the operating room. Operating, not not being operated on. So it makes a big difference. I remember we, at a church once in Loma Linda, had a lady come in and talk to us, Hulda Crooks. I have a park named after her now. See, you're so young, you probably don't know all these people. Hulda Crooks. By the time she came to talk to us, she was 87 years old, had just 2 weeks before that time had climbed to the top of Mount Whitney, which is the tallest mountain in the 48 states. And I know after I moved to Kentucky, which would have been more than 3 years later, I saw her on the news, evening news once, that Hulda Crooks made it to the top of Mount Whitney. So she had been over 90 when she was still climbing to the top of the mountain. And she ultimately lived to be, I think, 104 and wasn't really sick till she died. And, in Loma Linda, you commonly have people driving their car to the hospital to do volunteer work when they're 100. It's just you get used to that if you live there, but it's not common in Kentucky. Kentucky, I think we lead everything bad. We're either in the top first 3, the most obese, the most diabetes, the most heart disease, the least likely to exercise, the most number of teeth missing in adults. I mean, we've got all the bad stuff. We're just not a healthy state. So, and there's good studies, as we'll see, that if you take people that don't have good health and still put them on a good diet, they can greatly benefit from it. So we want to see that today. One person I was impressed with, maybe the most probably in Loma Linda of all our professors, was Dr. Mervyn Harding. And he was founder of the School of Health, Public Health at Loma Linda. And I recall that he had like 4 doctorates, probably the most educated man I've met. He had, of course, medical degree. And then he was doctor, I think, in pharmacology and anatomy and public health. And he reminded me a lot of this book, How Not to Die, because he always researched, always gave the details. And we'd hear him give talks on like how much protein do you need in your diet, or how can you eat to avoid heart disease, or how can you treat diabetes with diet. And no matter what talk he gave, he would give all the science real in deep, give you the guidelines. And then he'd always close with one statement. He said, the good Lord has provided everything we need in a wide variety of fruits, grains, nuts, and vegetables. I think that was it. I mean, that was all his science always supported that last statement, but he always closed by talking about the good Lord provided everything we need in just the wide variety of food that he made for us. And it's interesting, that was 82 when I heard him. And I looked at all the dates of all these studies in the book. Most of them now are over the year 2000. I mean, just the past couple of years, more and more research has come, and it all supports the same thing, that a healthy diet really has great benefits. So we're going to look at that in perspective with diabetes today. Probably the majority, and this is probably true of Chandra too, the majority of the patients I see in the office have their health affected in some way by improper diet and exercise. They're just suffering high blood pressure. Had a lady in recently, I won't say when, but 300 pounds, struggling with her weight. Blood pressure was yesterday, 180 over 116 or 118. Not good. And so all the time, people like that are having struggles because of their health. And it's not fun to be sick. I'd much rather be running down the course than in the hospital in a bed. I had the benefit of moving to Stanford before we had a McDonald's. And so we only had two restaurants, I think, Druthers and Pizza Hut. The only two restaurants in Stanford. No fast foods otherwise. And then I saw McDonald's come in and several other fast foods, and I've seen, because I've been in practice from before till after that, the marked effect it's had on the number of people obese. And we do deliveries in the hospital. We used to never worry about body mass index. Now we have to score them because the anesthetist won't let them deliver if their body mass index is over 50. But we commonly get women who are close to that. And we used to never see that. It's just really been a trend, and not a good one. I think it was prior to the pandemic that they predicted that the current generation would be the first generation in over 200 years that would die at a younger age than the previous generation. For 200 years, our succeeding generations always had better lifestyle, better longevity, live longer. And this last generation is actually going to die sooner than their parents because of so many diseases related to lifestyle. And certainly now added to that is the big effect on drugs and young people dying. But so currently, I thought to throw this tidbit out because Chandrakant's probably too young to remember this. When I came into practice, normal cholesterol level was listed up to 300. They didn't tell you your cholesterol was high unless it was above 300. And that's primarily because they had no idea what to do with cholesterol other than that. I mean, when I was in Loma Linda, 78 through 82, they were probably one of the only people talking about meatless diet and how healthy it is and why low cholesterol is going to prevent heart disease. That wasn't talked about in the early 80s. Again, we listed cholesterol up to 300 is normal because we didn't have the statins or any medicines, and no one believed the diet thing, that would work. So, but now again, all the research is coming. Oh, come on. Now we can start. But it's just interesting how we've now realized that we need to drive those numbers down, that bad fats in the body cause lots of bad harm to us. And it's largely related to the food we eat. So I think currently we have, when we're talking about diabetes, one third of adults currently have pre-diabetes, which is a condition that oftentimes leads to diabetes, and 1/2 of people over 65 have pre-diabetes. So it's just a massive epidemic that's way more than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. Fast food and pop. When we were a kid, we had pop twice a year. I think once we went out to eat on my mom's birthday, and once when The Wizard of Oz was on TV and we'd had a rip throat. That was it. We didn't, or went to the bar. My grandpa owned a bar, so we get pop from him. But it wasn't something that now it's just every day. People drink 6 or more sodas a day sometimes. Really bad. So it's resulted in this pre-diabetes, which is leading to more diabetes, and that causes all kinds of problems, from blindness to losing your feet to the number one killer. We had a cardiologist tell us this once, that we ought to consider diabetes as a form of heart disease, because he said that's how the majority of them die. They don't usually live long enough to die from renal failure, kidney disease, because they die first of heart disease. It just is a bad disease. The sugar, too much sugar in the blood, none of your blood vessels like it. Your big ones are your small ones. Your small ones, you get little decay in the back of your eyes and in your feet and your kidneys, and bigger decay in the big vessels, leading to your heart. And it's like termites in the wall. You don't always see that going on, but the damage that occurs from the sugar, and then you add to that many times bad fats and happen to smoke on top of that, and you got a bad combination just to destroy your blood vessels in your body, which keep you healthy. So is there a way to stop the progression? Is there a way to stop so many people from getting into prediabetes and to getting all the way into diabetes? And then if they have diabetes, to get all the complications. So is there a way to stop that? So we're going to look at a video now. I'm going to do 4. First one is how to prevent prediabetes from turning into diabetes mellitus. And this again is by Dr. Greger, who is the author of the book and of the website. and I guess I get used to that. So maybe for non-medical people, a lot of what we do in medicine is still documented by research and studies. And so, and sadly, a lot of that is funded for by medical companies. They reference metformin and they do studies on that. And so it skews. I remember when we were in Loma Linda again, the old Campus Hill is where the original sanitarium used to be. That's where the School of Public Health was. And they would state that they were the School of Health, and they'd look down the hill, at the School of Medicine, saying, and they're the School of Disease, And it was sad but true. And whether we're School of Disease or School of Medicine, they don't study health a lot and they don't practice it. Again, I referenced the high cholesterols. The medical profession just didn't know about that. So the fact that we have some of these studies, and there are oodles in this book, there's probably 100 to 150 bibliography references on each of these chapters. Lots of research that goes out to this that all support the same thing. That diet and exercise alone, you do the 5 goals that they talked about there, you had 100% reduction in the risk of diabetes. Now, I'll guarantee you, if they had a drug that could do that, it would sell for more than $1,000 a month. There's a shot now they give in the eye, and it's one shot, one time. And if you have retinitis pigmentosa, where you get cancer, I guess, from that, the shot will prevent that. And so the shot, they charge $750,000 for the one shot. And they asked the CEO on the news once why they charge so much. And I thought he'd talk about all the research and things. He said, well, we looked at what vision is worth. And the industry says, if you lose your vision, like in an accident on the job, it's worth $1 million. They reimbursed you $1 million. So we thought our drug would be worth $1 million if we could keep someone healthy with their eyesight. So you look at, these drugs that are all advertised on TV now. You see them, Trulicity and Ozempic, and all that advertised on TV for diabetes now, and they're all $1,000 or more a month for that. And we get insurance. So you wonder why your insurance costs so much. It's because people aren't being healthy, and then the drugs to treat those things cost a lot more than they should. And it's a lot of politics there, but it's so much of it could be prevented by the studies that they just referenced here. Just the 5 things are, I tried to remember them, and it was trying to exercise 4 hours a week. Now that may seem a long time, but so is sitting in dialysis. You spend more than 4 hours a week sitting in dialysis chair if you get dialysis. So 4 hours a week is not that much if it keeps your health. Having fiber, and I don't know what the goal was, but like 30 grams or something high. So fiber is indigestible food substance, but it has a wealth of benefits in our body. And so, but that was a goal, to increase fiber and decrease your weight by 5 or 10%, decrease your fats in your diet and your saturated fats. And those 5 things. And they said, just not even instructing people, just telling them they should try to do that. And you could see on the study there, not all did it. But for every step down, if they did one of those things or 2 of them or 3 of them, they had less and less risk of diabetes, till the finding that if you did 4 or 5 of them, you had no diabetes. That was a major study. And it just shows the benefit of just a good, healthy diet combined with good exercise. So here's a question for you. What are the 3 basic food groups? Well, I should have qualified that. What are the 3 basic food groups in Kentucky? You got 2 of them: sugar, salt, and grease. Those are 3 things that make you want to eat more food. So when you test it out once, you get some plain almonds, and you get salted almonds, and you're going to eat more salted almonds. You get plain carrots, or you salt your carrots, you'll eat more carrots. Salt makes us want to eat more. We do circumcisions on little babies, and if they're too fussy and crying, we just give them baby candy. We'll give them sugar water. and they quiet right down. They'll suck. They give me that sweet thing. I'm going to keep sucking, and I won't even cry. I mean, from a baby, that's just ingrained in us. Those three things. Well, guess who knows that? The whole restaurant food industry knows that. So very high salt content in all restaurant food. And no one wants to break the barrier and become less salty, because then people won't go to that restaurant. They go to the one where the salt is, because they give you a salty whatever French fries. So you buy a large instead of a small because you can't stop eating them. And then you have to get a big soda because you're thirsty because you ate all the salt. And the whole industry is against us. When we had the Garden of Eden, I thought of this. You had food. God said food. It was about food. You can have food from any place you want except this one tree. I mean, Satan could only advertise on that one tree. Now he can advertise on every possible food substance. And he takes food and turns it into something that he knows is not bad. He causes disease. He loves all that kind of stuff. He doesn't like us to be healthy and glorifying God. He likes us to be decrepit and die. That's what it is. But he has access through all that. So again, you look at even the commercials on TV, and they're all geared towards targeting you for those kind of foods. When was the last time you saw an ad on TV for broccoli? Very seldom. Once in a while, the prune industry gets on there and gets a commercial. Or the raisins. They even renamed them, I think. What do they call them? Dried plums or something? The prunes. But anyway, they rebranded. But anyway, the whole food industry and the advertising industry and how they box it and package it, you take a little child who cannot read, and I'll guarantee they can pick out junk food in the grocery store. They just know it inherently. That I want that, and they just know what it's like. So that we got a whole industry against us. How can we fight against that? Is there a way? And the three food groups really are proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Now we realize there's so much more than those. Like fiber is not considered a food group, but essential. And so many phytochemicals, phytonutrients now that they find are good. You can't put in a vitamin pill. You can only get it if you eat food out from the garden, because that's where it all is naturally grown. So just if you want to summarize this whole book, really, I haven't read the whole book yet, but in just 4 words, it's these 4. Garden is good. Well, then that's stop the garden good, barn bad. That's it. If you're looking for source of food, the garden is where God gave us food. Everything that grows. And you look at the creation, then he provided it for us that way. The fruits of the trees and the grains that are growing. But that's what's good. And the more we tamper with food, the more we process food, the less nutritious it gets. So you take an apple and you beat it up and make it into apple sauce, and it's not as healthy. Usually you add sugar to it when you do that. And you've taken out some of the fiber, and then you strain it and turn it into apple juice, and you do even worse. You take an orange and turn it into orange juice, and you got probably the calories of 3 oranges in 1 glass of orange juice. Now, you'd seldom sit down and eat 3 oranges because 1 is filling. So food in its natural state is more filling to us, and food that's processed and refined is not. So you can wolf it down. Fiber fills you up. There's some fiber that swells with fluid, soluble fiber. And so that just makes you feel, I'm full. I ate whatever, and you eat a good hearty breakfast, and you'll be fuller for longer than if you have just twice as many calories in donuts, because of the way your body processes food. So, and you look at a cow. A cow is basically a food processor. So they come and they're just going to eat grass all day long, and maybe corn if they get it, so they can fatten them up for the market. And then they turn all that into just processed and refined food. So they throw out lots of the bad part. So they take enriched flour you've heard about. Well, what they do is they take out all the good stuff and put 3 things back, and they call it enriched. And you're missing everything from the flour that should be there. So all the food industry. Now, for some reason, people liked white bread, the Wonder Bread. When that first came out, we degraded, right? We started doing those things. Huh? I'm not sure. How much, here's just a little trivia question. How much fiber is there in a big piece of steak? 0. There's no fiber from any food that comes from animal products. None. And yet it's an essential part of your diet. It fills you up when you eat. So you get all concentrated calories. In the book, and I forget the details, but they even talked about fat chickens. I mean, chickens used to have only like 16, I think it was, grams of fat in their body. And now it's like 200 grams or something. Just fat chickens. Because they want them bigger for market, and you sell them for more, and you pump them up quick, so you turn them around every 90 days or something. So you get your fryer chickens. So the food you do eat, if it's meat, is already tampered with. It's not just your chicken that ran around outside for a long time. It's one that was high-fed, bad food. Everything that can't possibly go in a hot dog, they put in the chicken food. And then the chickens eat it, and we think chicken's a healthier meat than red meat for some reason. Yet there's more fat in it. So all of that we goes back to, let's get back to the best kind of food that we should eat. So with that, we'll look at our next video, the best diet for diabetes.
There are all sorts of different scoring systems to rate diet quality. My favorite, for simplicity, is the Dietary Phytochemical Index, fame for a simple concept. It's just the percent of your calories from whole plant foods, so 0 to 100. The average American diet has a score of 12 out of 100. So like on a scale of 1 to 10, our diet is a 1. You can split people up based on how they score and show how the higher you score, the better your metabolic markers when it comes to diabetes risk. There appears to be like this stepwise drop in insulin resistance and insulin-producing beta cell dysfunction as you eat more and more plant-based. And that highest group was only scoring about 30. Less than a third of their diet was whole plant foods, but better than the lowest, which was down around the standard American diet. No wonder diets centered around plants, emphasizing legumes, beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, whole grains, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds, and discouraging most or all animal products, are especially potent in preventing type 2 diabetes, and as a little bonus, has been associated with much lower rates of obesity, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, cardiovascular mortality, and cancer. And not just preventing type 2 diabetes, but treating it as well. A systematic review and meta-analysis found that the consumption of vegetarian diets is associated with improved blood sugar control. But how much improved? Here's one of the latest trials. The effect of a strictly plant-based diet centered around brown rice, which is done in Asia, versus the conventional diabetic diet on blood sugar control of patients with type 2 diabetes, a 12-week randomized clinical trial. For the diabetic control diet, they set up food exchanges and calculated specific calorie and portion controls, whereas on the plant-based diet, people could eat as much as they want. That's one of the benefits. The emphasis is on food quality rather than quantity, and they still actually lost more weight. But even after controlling for the greater abdominal fat loss in the plant-based group, they still won out. Of course, it only works if you actually do it, but those that pretty much stuck to the healthier diet dropped their A1C levels 0.9%, which is what you get taking the leading diabetes drug, but of course only with good side effects. Yeah, but would it work in an underserved population? The impact of a plant-based diet support program on mitigating type 2 diabetes in San Bernardino, the poorest city of its size in California. A randomized controlled trial, but not of a plant-based diet itself, as the title suggests, but of just an education program telling people about the benefits of a plant-based diet for diabetes, and then it was up to them. And still got a significant improvement in blood sugar control. Here are the numbers. Got a little better in the control group, but way better in the plant-based instruction and support group. And more plant-based diets are not just effective in the prevention and management of diabetes, but also its complications. Check this out. One of the most devastating complications of diabetes is kidney failure. This shows the decline in kidney function in 8 diabetics in the 1 or 2 years before switching their diets. They all showed this steady, inexorable decline on a fast track to complete kidney failure and dialysis. But then they switched to a special supplemented vegan diet, and their kidney decline was stopped in its tracks. Imagine if they had switched a year or two earlier. Most diabetics don't actually end up on dialysis, though, because they die first. Cardiovascular disease is the major cause of premature mortality among diabetics. That's why plant-based diets are perfect. There's a general scientific consensus that the elements of a whole food plant-based diet, legumes, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and nuts with limited or no intake of processed foods and animal products, are highly beneficial for preventing and treating type 2 diabetes. Equally important, plant-based diets address the bigger picture by simultaneously treating cardiovascular disease, our #1 killer, along with obesity, high blood pressure, lowering inflammation, and we can throw cancer into the mix too, our #2 killer. The bottom line is that the case for using a plant-based diet to reduce the burden of diabetes and improve overall health has never been stronger.
On neuropathy, which is a very painful disease, complication of diabetes, painful feet, and it can lead to kinds of problems. You get less sensation in your feet, not only just painful feet, but less sensation, like you get burning sensation. But I had a fellow come in my office just maybe last year, and he had just noticed that morning his second toe was like 2 or 3 times the size of his big toe. Big red festering sore on it, and it didn't hurt a bit. He just happened to notice it in the shower when he looked down. And he, of course, had diabetes, and he had neuropathy. He couldn't feel the infection. It wasn't hurting to him. So he went checking his feet regularly, and almost lost his foot. But they did a study on neuropathy, and in 4 days, as little as 4 days, they put however many people, a couple dozen, I think, on a vegan diet, strict, no animal product in their diet, and in 4 days they reported a resolution of their pain. The sensation took longer to start to come back, but it was a very impressive study, just that quickly that it can make a difference in your diet. I saw a book in the airport when I was flying through years ago, and I long since wish I had bought it, but it was called The Picture Perfect Diet, I think. It was the whole thing was just pages of food, pictures of food. And on every fold of page, the left page had the bad food, and the right page had the good food. And on every spread, they were the same amount of calories. So, and what you saw is you got that little itty-bitty piece of like chicken dumplings or this big plate of broccoli, and it's the same amount of calories. And after you look through that book long enough, you start to think, I'm getting the idea what healthy food is like. It's a lot more, you can eat a lot more from it. I remember seeing a video once of, I forget what the purpose of the video was, but they were showing 2 women going through the cafeteria at their work, and the one was thin and said, oh, I'm hungry, and give me a double portion of whatever, and give me a big serving of this. And the other lady was heavy and said, no, I'm on a diet, I'm trying to lose weight, so I only want 1 chicken dumpling, and I want just 1 slice of pie. And when they added up the plates, the calories on the plates, the thinner woman who had a lot more food on her plates had like half the calories of the woman who was trying to eat healthy, but was just picking the wrong foods. And so if you keep picking the wrong foods, you don't know why certain foods are better foods, we will never have the good outcome. So to simplify it, still whole food? Whole food, referring to they don't beat it up a lot and take all the good stuff out first. Whole food and plant-based is no question, it's the diet that is healthiest for our body. I thought this was just a little thought out of the book. Meat makes you grow out, and plants make you grow up. I had a study done in Loma Linda with Adventist children, because a lot of them were vegetarian, and they found out the vegetarian kids were 1 inch taller on the average than the meat-eating kids. Same, everything else was the same. But meat has the extra concentrate calories, and it goes quicker to your body. I don't know, years ago, it seemed like, now we don't have them anymore, but they had the old VW bugs, and they had you'd see how many people could you cram in a bug. So by the time you get like 15 or 20 in there, it's hard to get the next person in there, right? And that's kind of what happens with diabetes. Our anesthetist in our hospital lovingly said, when you're fat all over. And she was referring to, she's got to look down someone's airway, and if their body mass index is so high, their airway is narrow, their tongue is bigger. Everything is, the fat is deposited all over. And we do a C-section on someone, you can see just layers of fat, and some have, an inch of fat, and some probably more than 6 inches, just fat. So it's all over the organs too, it gets fat is all over. But it gets in the cells on a microscopic basis. And when the cells are too full in a sense of fat, which is sugar, your body does amazing things. It can turn sugar into fat, by how it metabolizes. And you get triglycerides, which are, a form of sugar stuck together 3. But your muscles need glucose. Glucose is typically the energy fuel for our body, especially our muscles. And your body has insulin receptors that help, and your insulin guides the sugar into your muscles so they can work. One, if you're not working, your body doesn't need to do that, so you're not calling upon the sugar to begin with. And 2, if your fat cells or your muscle cells already have too much fat stored in them, it can't get more sugar in when you need it. So you get insulin resistance. The insulin, and they'll show this on this next video, the insulin quits working as well. And so you have all the sugar hanging around in your blood vessels where your body doesn't like it and causes all the damage, and it's not going to proper places because there's too much fat in the body. And that's largely related to diet. So we'll look at the next video here. What causes insulin resistance?
Studies dating back nearly a century noted a striking finding. If you take young, healthy people and split them up into 2 groups, half on a fat-rich diet and the other half on a carb-rich diet, within just 2 days, this is what happens. The glucose intolerance skyrockets in the fatty diet group. In response to the same sugar-water challenge, the group that had been shoveling in fat ended up with twice the blood sugar. As the amount of fat in the diet goes up, so does one's blood sugar spikes. It would take scientists nearly 7 decades to unravel this mystery, but would end up holding the key to our current understanding of the cause of type 2 diabetes. When athletes carb load before a race, they're trying to build up the fuel supply within their muscles. They break down the starch into glucose in their digestive tract. It circulates as blood glucose, blood sugar, and is taken up by our muscles to be stored and burned for energy. Blood sugar, though, is like a vampire. It needs an invitation to come into our cells, and that invitation is insulin. Here's a muscle cell. Here's some blood sugar outside, waiting patiently to come in. Insulin is the key that unlocks the door to let sugar in our blood enter the muscle cell. When insulin attaches to the insulin receptor, it activates an enzyme, which activates another enzyme, which activates 2 more enzymes, which finally activates glucose transport, which acts as a gateway for glucose to enter the cell. So insulin is the key that unlocks the door into our muscle cells. What if there was no insulin, though? Well, sugar would be stuck out in the bloodstream, banging on the door to our muscles and not be able to get inside, and so with nowhere to go, sugar levels would rise and rise. That's what happens in type 1 diabetes. The cells in the pancreas that make insulin get destroyed, and without insulin, sugar in the blood can't get out of the blood into the muscles, and blood sugar rises. But there's a second way we could end up with high blood sugar. What if there's enough insulin, but the insulin doesn't work. The key is there, but something's gummed up the lock. This is called insulin resistance. Our muscle cells become resistant to the effect of insulin. What's gumming up the door locks in our muscle cells, preventing insulin from letting sugar in? Fat. What's called intramyocellular lipid, fat inside our muscle cells. Fat in the bloodstream can build up inside the muscle cell, creating toxic fatty breakdown products and free radicals that can block the signaling pathway process. So no matter how much insulin we have out in our blood, it's not able to open the glucose gates, and blood sugar levels build up in blood. This mechanism by which fat, specifically saturated fat, induces insulin resistance wasn't known until fancy MRI techniques were developed to see what was happening inside people's muscles as fat was infused into their bloodstream. That's how they found out that elevation of fat levels in the blood causes insulin resistance by inhibition of glucose transport into the muscles. And this can happen within just 3 hours. One hit of fat can start causing insulin resistance, inhibiting glucose uptake after just 160 minutes. Same thing happens in adolescents. You infuse fat into their bloodstream, it builds up in their muscles and decreases their insulin sensitivity, showing that increased fat in the blood can be an important contributor of insulin resistance. And then you can do the opposite experiment, lower the fat in people's blood, and the insulin resistance comes right down. Clear the fat out of the blood, and you can clear the sugar out of the blood. So that explains this finding. On a high-fat diet, the ketogenic diet, insulin doesn't work as well. Our bodies are insulin resistant. But as the amount of fat in our diet gets lower and lower, insulin works better and better. This is a clear demonstration that the sugar tolerance of even healthy individuals can be impaired by a low-carb diet. But we can decrease insulin resistance, the cause of type 2 diabetes, by decreasing saturated fat intake.
Saturated fats, you have good fats and bad fats. And the good fats are, we call MUFAs and PUFAs. Your monounsaturated fatty acids, your polyunsaturated fatty acids, and they come typically from plant foods. So nuts are a really good source of healthy fats, avocados, olives, and seeds, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds. So they have healthy fats, and they do ratios on those things. Like some of them, like 13 parts good fat to 1 part bad fat. But meat is largely saturated fat, and it's the saturated fats that do that clogging up in there. And the healthy fats actually, they don't do that, and they keep everything going better. So that's a whole thing why the plant-based diets are doing so good with preventing diabetes and then treating it, and why the saturated fats are linked to it. A lot of sugar in your diet doesn't cause diabetes. You'll have a problem with sugar in your diet if you have diabetes. But the cause seems to be too much fat, and the wrong kinds of fat that your body's eating. We're gonna have to go on. Academy of Pediatrics, just I think this past week or two, I heard on the news, came out with a pretty strong statement that on every visit with every child, that the pediatrician should stop and address the issue of obesity with the kids. That it is such a major problem now. It's not just a Johnny's too heavy. It's a major problem with the health, and it starts with children. So again, a third of children are overweight, and a third of children are obese now. And it starts early on. In fact, I looked up this study. I didn't see that in the book, but on the effect of breastfeeding. And breastfeeding leads to a lower chance of obesity in a child, and also a lower risk of insulin-dependent diabetes. Breastfeeding for a mother protects her from, she has a lower likelihood of getting diabetes for up to 25 years after she's done breastfeeding, if she breastfed for 6 months. So some profound benefits from simple things like that. But the kids come down with just wrong eating behaviors, and commonly when a baby cries, you give them a bottle, right? And if you do that with a bottle, they get the milk more, only less, so we'll give you that. And for babies on the breast, they just stop when they're done. Mom can't make meat, or they slow down a little bit. They go into like a just relaxed mode, so they want to stay there, but they're not nursing regular. And so babies know how to cut down normally when they're eating properly, but on a bottle, they get more food quicker. And with that, you're also, comfort feeding. We do that from little kid. They cry, well, here's the candy. We try not to give suckers out in our office for shots. Some of my nurses still like to do that. But trying, but we have a lot of wrong habits for kids even. High calorie foods and the Happy Meals, at McDonald's, there's loads of calories. Chicken nuggets, you can't be thin and eat chicken nuggets every day because there's just loads of calories in there for the kids. So it's right off the bat, kids were programming them for a hard time. What, did you have a question? So if you count total calories on the one study, and Chandra could maybe help with this, they wanted to limit total fat. You look at all your calories, and the calories from fat should be 30% or less. And saturated fat should be only 10%. So, and your majority of calories should come from carbohydrates. Carbohydrates do not cause diabetes. It's refined carbohydrates are not good, but carbohydrates are a key to avoiding it as well. All these plant-based substances work on. I had a nurse once. She said, Dr. Miller, I'm too tired to exercise. We're talking about exercise. She was overweight. And finally, she went on a good diet. She started exercising. And then I saw her when she lost 60 pounds. And she said, I'm only tired on the days I don't exercise. When I exercise, she said, I got energy all day long. And she was jogging or running 3 miles. But when they just boosted her energy all day long. So the very things we think would be a chore, sometimes same with eating. You start, these people, in another study we won't quote today, but they feel so much better. It's not that you live longer, you feel better in that process too. No one likes feeling, you get someone in the office and their blood sugars are in the 300s all the time, I'll guarantee you they don't feel good. They'll feel bad when we get their sugars down to 100 initially, just like you lower the thermometer if you're used to being warm. But they eventually have so much more energy. They can't believe how bad they felt, when the sugars are out of control. So how can we keep our kids from preventing diabetes? We got one last video and then we'll wind it up. How to prevent prediabetes in children.
Prediabetes is not just a high-risk state for the development of diabetes. Prediabetes can be a disease in itself. People with prediabetes may already have damage to their eyes, kidneys, blood vessels, and heart. Evidence from numerous studies suggests that the chronic complications of type 2 diabetes start to develop during the pre-diabetic state. So by the time we have prediabetes, it may already be too late to prevent organ damage, so best to prevent prediabetes in the first place, and the earlier the better. 30 years ago, virtually all diabetes in young individuals was thought to be autoimmune type 1 diabetes. But since the mid-90s, we started seeing an increase in type 2 diabetes among our youth, particularly in the United States. Indeed, the term adult-onset diabetes has now been scrapped and replaced with type 2, because children as young as 8 are now developing the disease, and the effects can be devastating. A 15-year follow-up of children diagnosed with type 2 diabetes found an alarming rate in young adults of blindness, amputation, kidney failure, and death in young adulthood. Why the dramatic rise in childhood diabetes? Because of the dramatic rise in childhood obesity. During the past 30 years, the number of children diagnosed as being overweight has increased more than 100%. Once an obese child reaches 6, they're likely to stay that way. And even if they don't, being overweight in our youth predicts adult disease and death regardless of adult body weight, even if we lose it. Being an overweight teen may predict disease risk 55 years later, twice the risk of dying from a heart attack, more cancer, gout, arthritis. In fact, being overweight as a teen was a more powerful predictor of these risks than being overweight in adulthood. This underscores the importance of focusing on preventing childhood obesity. So how do we do it? From the official American Academy of Pediatrics clinical practice guidelines, the problem appears to be kids eating too much fat and added sugars, and not eating enough fruits and vegetables. Doctors, at every occasion, beginning soon after a child's birth, should endeavor to give sound advice regarding nutrition and growth so that obesity and its complications may be curtailed. What might sound advice sound like? Well, the chair of the nutrition department at Loma Linda University published a paper suggesting not eating meat at all might be an effective strategy. Population studies have consistently shown that vegetarians are thinner than comparable non-vegetarians. This is from the largest such study to date. A body mass index of over 30 is considered obese, 25 to 30 overweight, and under 25 ideal weight. The non-vegetarians were up at 28.8. The average meat eater in the US is significantly overweight. As one gets more and more plant-based, the average BMI drops. But even the average vegetarian in the US is overweight. The only dietary group that was on average ideal weight were those eating strictly plant-based. So that comes out to be about a 33-pound difference between the vegans and the meat eaters. Vegetarian children grow up not only thinner, but taller. Vegetarian kids grow to be about an inch taller than other kids. Apparently, meat intake is somehow negatively associated with height. I can just hear the Dairy Council now saying, oh, it's because of all the milk the veggie kids must be drinking. No. The veg kids consume significantly less dairy and much lower animal protein intake overall. Meat intake is apparently associated with growing wider, though. In school-aged children, the consumption of animal foods, meat, dairy, or eggs, is associated with an increased risk of overweight, whereas plant-based equivalents like veggie burgers, veggie dogs, veggie cold cuts were not, and whole plant foods like grains, beans, and nuts were found to be protective. This may be because plant-based diets are low in energy density, high in starch, fiber, and water, which may increase feelings of fullness, and resting energy expenditure, meaning resting metabolic rate. Eating plant-based appears to boost metabolism, so we just kind of burn more calories at rest, even when you're sleeping. However, we're not sure how much of the benefits are due to increased consumption of plant foods versus the decreased consumption of meat. Either way, plant-based diets should be encouraged and promoted for optimal health. Local, national, international food policies are warranted to support social marketing messages and to reduce the social, cultural, economic, and political forces that make it difficult to promote such diets. For example, although the advice to consume a plant-based diet is sound, questions arise regarding the relative high price of produce. Yes, we can reduce the burden of childhood obesity, prevent the further spread of disease, but we need to ensure that plant foods are affordable and accessible to children of all income levels. Fruits and vegetables may not fit on the dollar menu, but our kids are worth it. Getting diabetes in childhood cuts nearly 20 years off their life. Who among us wouldn't go to the ends of the earth to enable our kids to live 20 years longer?
And exercise are very difficult. It's not an easy thing to do. There's like brain chemistries, dopamine and whatever. You eat sugar every day, you get a little buzz from that. It's hard to cut out of that. So there's a lot of reasons why habits are hard to change. How can we go about improving? Remember that one study, we had 5 different things. If they did even one of the 5, they still had some reduction. and they got 3 or 4 of the 5, and even if they didn't hit the goals perfectly, they still had the benefit. So how can we overall just become healthier people would be a goal. So I want to close this 2 thoughts. One would be the practical first. Zig Ziglar, if you remember hearing him, he's an old motivational speaker, now dead. But he talks about setting goals. Said you'll never hit a goal that you can't see. And he talked about, he could teach, guaranteed, teach anybody in one lesson to shoot a bow and arrow better than a gold medal winning archer. I said, here's what we do. We're going to take the gold medal winning archer and put a blindfold on him, spin him around about 10 times and let him shoot. And then we're going to let you see the target and you'll get closer. And so the point being, if we don't have a goal somehow set in our life, what we want to do, food-wise or exercise-wise to change, it's going to be hard to reach it. So start with a goal, and it doesn't have to be big. You just start, and and the benefit comes later. Zig Ziglar talks about his own experience trying to lose weight, and said he'd gotten his jogging suit, and he was all ready to go, and he had all these things, and he'd already written a book apparently that said he had lost so much weight, and he hadn't lost the weight yet. So he said when the book's published, he said, I'm going to have to have lost that much weight. But he said the first time he could only run to the next mailbox in his neighborhood. But he said he kept at it, and he finally got around the block, and then he talked about, because he speaks and travels around the world, how many times he's benefited by running along the beach for 3 miles or running with college kids who could hardly keep up with him. And he just pointed out that was not a chore at all. That was a benefit. He could enjoy that. So making good habits pays off, but it just takes some discipline to do that. Start with just a few things again. I always say about exercise, the hardest thing to do with exercise is just getting your tennis shoes on and getting your little butt off the ground, off the couch. If you just commit to, say, 5 minutes, boy, you'll commonly spend more than that. Think, okay, now that I'm doing it, I'll go a little longer. But commit, and if you have meat every day, or if you have 3 pop every day, say, well, okay, for 2 weeks at least, I can cut down to 1 pop a day, or 3 days a week I won't have any pop at all. And somehow you start, and then after those 2 weeks you'll probably feel better. You start to say, okay, I can stick with that, or I'm going to toughen it up a little more. But so set achievable goals when you do this, but also just learn to make common sense and count. You going through the potluck, you can find better food and not as good food. Try to pick out a little more of the good and a little less of the bad. So try to, if you're going to go have French fries, have a small fries instead of a big one. Start with just little things, but aim for what's the best. My mom had a statement, and I've never heard this from anyone. Surely it's a common statement, but she'd always say this: good, better, best, never let it rest till the good is better and the better is best. So when it comes to diet and exercise, do that. Aim to improve wherever you're at. Aim to improve and go a little closer to where you should be, and then continue to re-improve that, so you can develop better and better habits. And again, don't wait too long, because some of these studies show, boy, if you just do it all out at once, you get benefits within a week. So don't wait too long. Don't make it too slow. Last, I want to close on the spiritual part of all this. God's not interested in just sinners living longer. He has no benefit in that. God wants us to become better people still. So Paul talked about, he said, 2 Corinthians 4:16, don't lose heart. Though the outer man is decaying, yet the inner man is being renewed day by day. So eventually, no matter what you do, Hulda Crooks finally died when she was 104, which was pathetic. If she was in Adam's time, this poor woman died when she was only 104. But anyway, God wants us to be renewed on the inside, and the health part of it ought to be so we can serve Him better and think better and stay with Him better, so we're not as taken in by all of Satan's wares. So that's the perspective, is that focus on the long term. Really, the priorities. Again, Paul says, look up, set your mind on things above, not on things that are on the earth. You look at the wine sparkling in the cup and you'll be pulled in. You look at all the ads on TV and you want to go out and buy chips. There's a reason why McDonald's advertises, because they know when they stop advertising, they stop seeing the benefit. So don't think you're not affected by ads. We are. So be careful what you're looking. Focus on the up, on Christ. Paul said, run the race, focusing on Christ and not the things around us. Lastly, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 3:16, our body is a temple of God, and the Spirit of God dwells in us. So start with that principle when you're ready to open up the candy drawer, or you're ready to open up the refrigerator and get whatever you know is not good in there. Remember, first of all, starting point is that your body is a temple of God, and the Holy Spirit's dwelling in you. Paul said, whatever you eat or drink, do all to the glory of God. And so, so when you're ready to eat, there's a reason we should say our blessing, that God could bless all the food on our plate, right? So think through that next time. Give him an easier job blessing you. You can't put poison on your plate and then say, okay, now bless me. So, but use prayer, when you're eating to focus again back on things above. God, help me put in perspective what I'm eating today, so I'll eat for your glory, and I'll eat to my health so I can serve you. And then you have the power of God and the Spirit who dwells in you to help you with those decisions. It will be easier to walk away from what you maybe couldn't walk away from before. And so that you remember you're a temple, remember to pray before you partake of food, and then surrender all those thoughts and habits to the Lord, and he can guide you through it. Well, thank you. Any last questions? Well, again, we hope you enjoyed it, and watch us online again if you like. And we, next month, March, how not to die from suicidal depression. So that's a common